I'll just say a quick hello. Jennifer Kushell, EYP CEO and founder. We're missing David Stein today. We have Steve Perot online and Cherie Belusic from our team, and our special guest, Christina Broderick is joining us from Ignite EDU, a beautiful company that helps young people with their mental health in K through 12 and high schools, K through 12 and colleges. And today we're going to be talking about the fear and anxiety that young people are facing going into fall. These are unprecedented rates that we're seeing right now, and a lot of new research is coming out around that we wanted to discuss. I do want to mention that this is part of a 4-part series that we're launching at EYP over the next few weeks. I wanted to put in front of you the dates just so you can mark your calendars. A week from today, we're going to be talking about funding opportunities for career education, especially around the K-12 market. There's a tremendous amount of CTE funding that we want to talk about and how it's relevant to both K-12 and higher ed. We're also going to do another webinar on broader economic opportunities for students. So anyone involved in career planning can recognize that there's a wide range of opportunities that oftentimes we miss when kind of empowering students to be economically self-sufficient. And then the last part is building social capital. So they're more engaged, they're happy, they're more supported. And yes, Hasina, thank you so much for your question. We will be sending around a recording of this when we're done, so anyone can rewatch or share with their colleagues. So again, today, I'm Jennifer Kushell, and we have Christina Broderick. Christina, you want to say a quick hello and give everyone a little bit of background? We have about 2 or 3 minutes, maybe give them a big, a good sense of kind of where you come from and some of the beautiful experience you're bringing to the table and to the work that you do.
Sure. Hello, everybody. It's afternoon over here. I am located on the East Coast. It's a rainy, cloudy, weird day, but I'm so excited to be here with you all. As we mentioned, my name is Christina Broderick. I am a licensed social worker and a certified school social worker. I've worked across the entire education spectrum. Started in elementary school out in Los Angeles in California, and worked in middle schools, high schools, and higher ed here in New Jersey. And I'm also an adjunct instructor, so I teach up-and-coming social workers. A former psychotherapist. I left working in private practice a little bit ago to focus directly on my business, but I've worked across the entire lifespan from young students all the way through the adult population. And I created my company based on all of the direct work I was doing with students and the backwards approach that I was seeing that comes to mental health, right? In which we wait for problems to arise to then teach students, teach people about mental health and strategies. I'll dive in later about some of the more real firsthand experiences I saw. But what we do in my company is we work directly with schools, programs, partnerships on helping them become more mental health forward. I was a first generation college graduate myself. So I also make sure I work a lot with first generation programs and schools and populations, making sure that they also have direct resources and support as they are going along their journey.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. And just a minute or two on us. Jennifer Kushell, I've literally spent 27, almost 30 years working on youth employment, entrepreneurship, and youth engagement, and across the entire ecosystem, from working directly with tens of thousands of students to schools, to global youth organizations, even groups like the United Nations and the State Department on their programs and initiatives to engage young people and get them excited about life, excited about opportunities in the world. And it was a couple of years ago that we were asked by Bloomberg to build a program to teach work to young people and do it in a scalable way. And that's how we ended up building Exploring Your Potential. It was on the back of a New York Times bestseller we did called Secrets of the Young and Successful. And we've been very excited to be in this ed tech venture, education technology. We were able to build an online course, a 24-hour program, very comprehensive, that's now being deployed to schools all over the world to help the young people get really excited about their futures. So we're really happy to have the opportunity to bring this program to you today and many others like it. So getting to the actual problem, Christina, We are talking today about anxiety, fear, and really lack of direction with a lot of these young people. We see it every day. I know a lot of you who work in schools see this every single day, but now with the pandemic, we're coming back with not only all the normal challenges that we have of students, who are first gen, who are coming from traumatic backgrounds, who maybe just have normal life, issues that they're struggling with, and the pandemic on top of it to reconcile. I'd love to ask the audience if you could put into chat any challenges or concerns you have going into fall around the mental health issues that we can make sure that we touch on and incorporate into the conversation. Even just a few words here and there would be wonderful. Or, any comments on what you're seeing or experiencing. We'll give everyone a chance to jump in and share, and we'd love to hear your real stories if we can. But Christina, talk to us in the meantime about, what does this reality really look like? I've had kids shake and cry in my arms about not being, not knowing where they can go with their lives or what to do when they're going to graduate, or, why are they really in school when it doesn't seem to click with them? Shaking and crying. And frankly, I was crying in the arms of the Career Center when I was at 19 too. So I understand, but what are you seeing on the ground? You've been working with so many students in the work that you've been doing. Bring some light to it and show us what you're seeing, and also what's important for us to be addressing here.
Yeah. So to be frank, it's bad, right? The Mental Health America came out saying that we are in a youth mental health crisis. So pre-pandemic, right? Some of the things even then I was seeing were students who just really didn't understand how to handle academic pressures and stress. So very similar to you, I've scooped kids off of floors because they have to apply for this and finish this resume and do a project and study for this test and SATs and like all of these things. And they don't know how to handle stress. So they have a mental breakdown, right? Students who develop really unhealthy coping strategies as they're trying to navigate the academic landscape. Or students who just are facing a lot of real experiences in their own lives, in their environment, within the world that we live in, and don't know how to process all that they're feeling. So on the outcome of that, right, is that they are more angry, more depressed, withdrawn, right? And all of that takes a toll on their academic performance. So recognizing that pre-pandemic and then seeing how it is now, right, it has worsened a lot. We'll get into some actual stats later, but from the conversations you have with students, right, who are just very, very unsure about the next direction, not just of their life, but just with the world, but knowing that it's still impacting them in the way that they're moving forward, right? And it's scary when you're 16, 17, 18, it is already tough in and of itself. And then adding all these additional pressures that exist during this climate. So we've seen a lot of students just struggling, right, to find clarity, to have some general understanding, looking for connection, which has been really difficult to do during this time as well. And now as things are reopening, schools are reopening, some start opening back in the spring, excuse me. We've been seeing just some students are acclimating fine, but some students who before might have been extra social, might have been more involved, the staff are reporting that they feel they are seeming more retreated, right? That they're not really showing up as they used to, and there's a lot of concerns. So it's just it definitely varies by location and demographic, but I think across the board, right, we are definitely in, as Mental Health America says, a youth mental health crisis.
Christina, can I ask you a question? You talked about retreating. And even as an adult, I know that sometimes when I don't feel seen in the world or heard, I've had this in relationships as an adult, I'll retreat. And I know as a kid, when I was an entrepreneur and I was being taught, to follow the rules from everyone else, I retreated also. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of times in my life that I've seen that work for me, and also for so many other students who are retreating. They're mm-hmm. hanging in the back of the classroom. They're not showing up. They're not talking to people. Is a lot of this because we don't acknowledge them as individuals? or acknowledge their unique abilities and, I don't know, talents and skills? I always wonder about that.
Yeah, it's a mixture of things, right? So most often, right, it's a stress response. So it could be stress because what's happening in your environment is you don't feel connected to, right? So, right, if it's not a catering to your individual needs, I now feel stressed about the situation. So you can be retreating that way. The work may be difficult. There just may be general anxiety that can show up. So typically, us retreating, right, is a stress response. And we also don't do a good job in the education space teaching students about stress, how to process stress, how to properly respond to the stress that you are feeling, right? So the stressors can look very different depending on the student. And then their response to that is, well, I'm just going to turn inwards, right? And because of that, right, they just continue to feel more isolated and feel more alone, especially if you're in an environment where you don't feel like you belong.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, I remember when we've been, you know, we did a big program with Youth Build in California across all the California schools. And one of the big things we heard from them was that students typically wouldn't talk in classes often. And when they started going through our process with EYP, they started talking to other students about what they had experienced and realized that they weren't alone in the world. And it seems like a lot, especially when we're young and we haven't had exposure to a lot of different people, especially from different backgrounds, we think we're by ourselves in the problems that we have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the ability to relate to other people, right, is a way to help calm your nervous system, right? Knowing that there's other people that are going through something similar. The fact that I can just talk about this more freely with other people, right, is a way to help calm your nervous system. So it's a great opportunity when they are able to be in a space that can cultivate that type of shared community together.
Yeah, what are some good tactics that you would recommend for instructors and administrators that are on the call today? What kind of opportunities exist on a day-to-day basis to open up these conversations and these safe spaces for students?
Yeah, so we've seen a lot of people integrated into like their morning meetings. So almost every school, or like every grade, every class, you start the day, there's breakfast, right? They may run a morning meeting. So that morning meeting can be guided by intentional questions that you may want to ask students versus just like, how's your day? Or what do you, anything you're nervous about, right? Having intentional guided questions to help them start the day, right? To start building that community is a way to be able to be consistent, right? In the practices. Some schools have what are called advisory. So it is a group of students who meet with teachers. Sometimes it's once a week, sometimes it's like every other week, depending on the school structure. And advisory allows the students to have like a small group to connect with each other and build more intentional relations, right? So you can do morning meetings, you can have advisory. We also like to recommend having clubs that are run by the students, right? Obviously, there's an adult that's supervising it, right? But being able to have students who can talk to other students, right, about this, right? They're kind of the face of this. It's being led by students and can help other students feel more connected, right, than just hearing it come from the adults all of the time. So there's some three very easy, I think, quick ways that some schools and programs can create a space for students to be able to start building that community.
That's really beautiful. Yeah, we talk a lot at EYP about peer mentoring opportunities and about putting students in different dynamic groups, you know, having them present to a class, having them meet with individual students and work on problems together, or even cluster in groups. And I found, you know, in teaching on my side that I love shaking up those experiences because it keeps things dynamic and fresh. And, you know, we all know that one person speaking to a group for too long gets boring for any of us, but especially when you're a student and, you know, you've been raised with this and every 5 seconds there's something else to be looking and you're used to swapping and, you know, swiping away what you don't like or what you're, you know, looking for something more interesting. They can't do that when they're back in school, but their tendencies to want to move on the topic or change or be, you know, have a different type of experience is always there. And we're always competing with their phones. That's why we can't get them out of their hands. So I think the more we can do to be dynamic and shake things up, but you know, also give them opportunities to open up in different forums with different groups. I think that's huge. I pull kids up from the back of the rooms all the time and try to engage them because I never want anyone to fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk for a minute about the Strata report. Strata Education is an extraordinary a group that we are pretty obsessed with here at EYP. Amazing people who are really focused on a lot of the data that's driving activity and trends in education. And they came out with a report just a couple of weeks ago called Concerned, Worried, and Anxious, looking at what's happening with high school grads transitioning into college. And I know many of you are on both sides of the education spectrum and looking at not only the students who are graduating out of your programs, going up into higher education, hopefully, but also those of you in higher ed who are really wrapping your thoughts around how to boost enrollment and make sure that persistence is being addressed. I just want to pop into the chat for a second. Cherie, can you just catch us up on what's happening over in chat?
Yeah, so we just got one nice little message here from, is it Hasena? Before offering students spaces to engage them, there is fear about leaving their homes, either from the student or the parent. What are some suggestions to address that fear without having to go into counseling and therapy? About just even leaving the house, even coming into the school, right?
Yeah, and I'm going to make an assumption, and feel free to correct me, Hassan, if I'm wrong. I'm assuming the fear is because of COVID, right? That it's like, I'm afraid of what's going on. Okay, yeah. So, and I think the Strata report also hits on this and talking about the fear that we're seeing in not just with enrollment, but like a lot of students are fearful right now, right? Especially now we see different variants are coming out, numbers are changing, stats are changing, recommendations are changing, right? So we recognize the fear is valid, right? It's a very valid fear. And we want to make sure that we also communicate that, right? We don't want people, students in particular, families in particular, to feel more isolated in their fear, right? We want to validate that fear and that concern. We recognize this is scary. We recognize this is very difficult. We recognize that things keep changing and it makes it very confusing to know what is the best step to take for you and your family, right? So validating that can be really helpful, but then being able to offer alternative solutions that may be available for them, right? Is there a certain type of hybrid model that they can do? Can they ease in starting with virtual? Is there a way that they can at least come to campus, maybe not for school yet, but maybe there's a different welcome back event to show the different sanitary procedures the school is doing to help them feel more safe, right? So really thinking before just like diving back in, first day of school, things are open, what is the way to slowly integrate some of the students and families back into the school? If you don't want to have them talking with the counselors or going to therapy and counseling. But I will say a lot of surrounding that, right? Because the action, right, is that I'm physically don't want to go to school. It's usually directed by a certain thought pattern that is happening. So being able to work with someone who is a counselor, who understands mental health, to help them work through their thought patterns, to really be clear about the thought patterns that are going on that is connected to the feeling of fear, which is then connected to the action of them not wanting to go to school, would be really monumental for helping them move through that barrier that's not allowing them to go to school.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. You know, I think about the isolation too, and the disconnectedness that you mentioned. It seems to me that any opportunities we can create in our introductions, in our orientations, in our webinar calls, anything that we do to create conversation, like trusted spaces of conversation, maybe even a few minutes at the beginning of every class, at the end of every class, any opportunities for connectedness with trusted people is always going to help bring these issues to life and give young people an opportunity to collaborate, you know, and share thoughts with other people around them. And I think that solves for a lot of this fear and isolation, because a lot of us are just scared to talk about what we're feeling. Right. On Strata, there are a couple things I want to highlight, and I have one or two slides that I just want to look at, but a few of the key points that really stood out to me. The largest influence on the decision not to get more education right now from high school students was feeling too much stress, anxiety, and uncertainty. And that was 39% of them in this study that said that. So 40% pretty much are not continuing with their education because of this fear that we're talking about today. 26% are citing financial pressure. Another reason we at EYP really believe that having career education conversation early helps them understand how to monetize what they're learning, either right away, not just when they graduate, but right away. The other thing too is 7% are saying that they're not sure if their education will help them find a job. So oftentimes we don't focus as much on the ROI conversation about the investment in education that students and parents are having. They're looking at the value proposition, the opportunity cost. Am I going to make more money doing this versus this? Should I go right into a trade or into an apprenticeship? Why should I bother with a 4-year education? Also, if they're not getting this connected conversation in classes, oftentimes they feel like they're just alone. And what's the point of showing up? I've seen students in high school that are scared of math because they have a math teacher they're not connecting with, and thus they don't want to go into engineering. So the connectedness is so incredibly important. And one other point I wanted to make too is Strada also found that only about 50% are talking to program administrators or counselors on the phone, online, or in person. That is screaming to me that they are making decisions blindly or with very minimal guidance. We have also seen in EYP data, we studied about 12,000 students, and we showed that only 20% of the students are talking to experts about what they want to do with their lives. So this right here is one of the biggest takeaways, I would say, for this, this webinar. I would say really pay attention to how much social capital these young people are building, what kind of support structures they have around them, how comfortable they feel talking about what they're seeing, what their questions are, what they're scared about. This is as much mental health related as it is career related and next steps. And it's all about the enrollment and persistence as well, and their ability to graduate.
Yeah.
A couple other, Russ Watson, one of the leading behavioral scientists in the world, who we have had wonderful opportunities to work with over the years. Russ said, your comments are great. I've studied motivation for 3 decades. We know. Here's what I've learned. You cannot motivate students. You must create a learning environment where students motivate themselves. I love that. That's why we called it Exploring Your Potential, by the way. That means multiple ways for the spectrum of students to become motivated and engaged. Yes, absolutely. It's difficult. Yes. Is it doable? Yes. It takes sensitivity and awareness to make it happen. Thank you, Russ. That was really, really well stated in the chat there. And Christina, yes, thank you for creating a space to address these real life issues. We will share links. I would love to run programs like this for students as well, by the way, since we're all here talking about this. Let me go on and keep going here. So we are showing that the students are super stressed, super anxious, and confused. They're confused about what they're doing with their education and where their education is taking them. Also, will they find the support and the nurturing that they need as individuals when they get to their next stage of education? 16% of students are showing that who intended to go to college are not enrolling right now. And 40% who have an active acceptance letter are not deciding to attend. They're deferring that decision. Any one of you, I know we heard from someone earlier who was dealing with enrollment. This is directly impacting your enrollment. So this is not about more marketing material. It's not about more, getting them into orientation faster. There's a lot behind this and the fear and anxiety that's wrapped into this. And that's why we think it's so important that we have Christina here talking about mental health issues, specifically. We really encourage you to look at how these numbers impact your specific organizations. Make them real, make those numbers real. If you have 1,000, if you have 20,000 students, what does 40% of your outstanding acceptance letters look like if they don't show up? Another stat that they shared was right here that 36% of the total respondents are disrupted students. Can we afford, with all the work, with all the staffing, with all the expenses, with all the energy that we're putting into building educational programs, to have 36% of them not continuing? We can't afford this as an education field. And for parents and employers, there are a myriad of problems and challenges there as well. Anything you guys want to add to this? Okay. Here's a quote that is a little bit big and meaty, but we wanted to share this because this really beautifully shows the inside of what's going on in a student's mind. Confused, obligated, stressed. I'm confused as to what I want to spend the rest of my life doing. I don't want to go into debt right out of high school for something I probably won't end up doing, meaning a lot of students will study something that they don't see a clear path to leverage. I feel obligated because the only way to make a livable money is to get a higher education. It's not necessarily the only way, but there's that stress. After high school, unless you go into trades, this is obviously a student who's informed. I'm stressed because I have no money or family to help me pay for the high cost of college. We know that tons of students are struggling with this, and also especially first generation students or students without a lot of adult support don't know what resources exist. If you couple it with what we said before about how few of them are actually talking to experts and counselors, that's your problem right there. If they're not engaging and they're not reaching out for information and they're not tenacious in finding that information, how are they going to have these answers? This fear will linger. The high cost of college, and I haven't made good enough grades. I know a lot of students we're hearing from are scared that because of the transition to online learning, they struggled with the motivation. They struggled to turn their work in. They're looking at deadlines about enrollment and they're saying, well, it's over, I can't do anything. So again, that connectivity with adults, we're all loving adults who will pull kids through, regulations and pull them past deadlines and do everything we can to make them successful. They need to know that we exist and we're there for them to help them maneuver as best as we can. Yeah. And again, this was from a student who's employed full-time while going to school, trying to support their house and their parents. This is a first-generation student. Christina, I'm going to pass over to you to dive deeper into the mental health issues related to this.
Yeah, so we're finally getting some more updated data as it relates to the impacts that are coming from COVID-19. So in particular, for example, coming from Best Colleges, they did a survey and found that over 90% of college students, and that number, every time I look at it, it's like so alarming, 90% experience negative mental health symptoms due to the pandemic, right? So with nearly half of them struggling with isolation, anxiety, and a lack of focus. So already we knew within the college student population, some academic barriers were stress, anxiety, sleep. But before the pandemic, those numbers were around like 30%, 40%, right? And then seeing this larger jump in how many students collectively really struggled during the pandemic. So I think in and of itself, it was just very alarming to see these numbers coming out. And if even look at the high school age population, that youth ages 11 to 17 have been more likely than any other age group, right, to score for moderate to severe symptoms of anxiety and depression. They're struggling. And I think the more that we are able to highlight these numbers, the more that we can see how dire and important it is for us to take action, but also recognizing that it's a collective effort. Students don't exist in silos, and I'll dive into this a little bit more later too. But knowing so much of how important it is right now for all of us, right, to have this at the forefront, to really making sure we are taking some intentional action to work with students on their mental health, because it's not something that only some students, right, are dealing with. Almost all of our students, right, have faced some negative mental health symptoms during this time.
That's awesome. Do you want me to?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. And then this one, right, coming from the National Institute of Mental Illness, where they surveyed over 765 students. This is from a few years ago. They found that over 64% of students drop out of college due to a mental health reason. So alarming, so alarming. And while we in the education space can continue to focus on academic performance, and rightfully, right, focus on things like persistence, understanding now that actually a strong part of persistence is making sure that students have mental health support services and resources and understanding about mental health, right? If 64% of your college student population is leaving due to a mental health reason, a huge focus of the work that you're doing with students should be focused on mental health. So it just made sense to connect all of these pieces as we're having this conversation today, seeing that students are delaying enrollment, students are dropping out, right? And understanding that connection to mental health is such a big piece of the puzzle right now.
You know, one just note I want to throw in, if I could, one of the challenges with going to online learning or hybrid learning is a lot of teachers struggled with online learning as much as students did. Yeah. Especially those who've been teaching for very long periods of time in a certain way. And one of the things I wanted to mention, especially to those who are administrators, make sure that when you're doing online learning, you have very engaging people leading discussions or participating in discussions, because it's not just about the content and the learning that needs to occur, the A to G requirements, the topics, the trades. We have to make sure they're engaged too. And sometimes that might require some additional support from people like us who are very comfortable with being in an online environment. But I just want to mention that too, because I have talked personally to teachers who are terrified to be in this space and don't even want to be on camera themselves. Yeah. And that sets up a dynamic that's really, really hard.
Yeah. And you also bring in a point as well in terms of, and from an administration level, is making sure your staff are supported in what their mental health is like, right? I mean, all of us are adults, working adults on this call, and I definitely struggled with motivation. I struggle with a lack of focus, right? Because for students, educators, and most of us, right, work, school was a place we went to, right? I hopped in the car, I hopped on the train, I went to this place, I took the bus, went to this place, and this is where this happens. And now it was like this quick and sudden disruption, and now everything just became together. So while students struggled, adults struggled too, right? So how, me as a teacher, can I show up and have their engaging lessons for my students if my mental health is suffering, right? So it's also a piece of making sure that it's the community is taken care of, the community feels supported, and being able to, right, utilize your resources to making sure that your community has those supports and resources necessary.
Thank you. I wore my red today to remind us all that when things get overwhelming or frustrating, that returning to just love, frankly, our own humanity, even if we're struggling as administrators, as educators, is always, I think, one of the best tactics.
Yeah,
frankly.
So here I have just listed a very quick, but I think effective strategies administrators, program administrators, school administrators can do as we are transitioning into this fall semester, right? So first is taking a holistic approach. Students don't exist in silos. They're not only learning about mental health in one space, it's not only being affected in one space, making sure holistically, right, students are able to receive the supports and services that they need, and not just only in one separate space. Next is being intentional, right? So conduct a SWOT analysis, right? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities. Oh my gosh, I can't remember what the T stands for. I can't remember the T, sorry.
Steve, you're head of strategy.
I'm like having a huge brain fart here.
Threats.
Threats. Thank you. Threats, right? I always say SWOT, and I'm like, I remember it. So threats, right? Of your program, of your school, where do your students need the actual help, right? I think often we're all on all these newsletters, we're all on social media, we read all these articles, and we just start to haphazardly implement things, right? Or us on the top level, we think this is what needs to happen, but our parents, our students may feel very differently. So really being intentional about the type of services and programming that you are implementing within your school. Next is as a kind of goes back to the first one in terms of integrating it into all parts of the fabric of your culture. So if it is about mental health, if it is about workforce readiness, right, what have you, that is not just happening in one space, right? So whether I'm talking to the secretary or I'm in my math class or I'm in my gym class, right, that I'm hearing the same messages consistently. That was one of the hardest parts about me as a school social worker is one, I was one person for hundreds and hundreds of students. And then you get some teachers that are like, oh, I want to do this in my classroom, or I'm interested in this. And while we would do the work, they leave your classroom and don't get it anywhere else, right? So if we really think about student learning and the need for consistency and information, right? We need to see and hear it over and over again for us to really understand it. It means it has to be happening in so many different parts of the culture of our school and of our program. That also then ties into sustainable practices. As much as I love to do one-off workshops, they are not sustainable practices, right? Me coming and doing one workshop, Jennifer coming and doing one workshop is just not enough, right? A 30-minute and 90-minute workshop for your staff, right? What is sustainable that you can do? Are you implementing, right, courses and programs that are going to allow your students and your families and your teachers to see this information, to practice this information, right? To learn the strategies and skills consistently, right? In a sustainable way so that we can actually see the outcomes that we're looking for. And then the last is to collaborate with experts. I was just talking with a friend about this yesterday. One of my biggest pet peeves is when people just put bodies in places that they don't belong, right? That you're taking a social worker and having them teach math, right? That's not the place for them to be, right? So there may not actually be someone on your campus who can do the work that is necessary for your school right after you did that SWOT analysis. So what are the experts that you can lean on and collaborate with to really make sure that you can meet the goals that you're looking for within your school?
Beautiful. These are great tactics. Thank you so, so much. I'm going to throw a few more comments out, and then I want to turn to the audience. I would love to hear from Russ. He has amazing experience in this space, and a few others of you. Thank you so much for adding to chat. This is a really nice conversation happening there as well.
Yeah, I love that Russ is mentioning proactive. That is like the number one thing about my entire company, right, is that it's this reactive approach that we all take within our own learning, right? How can we just start becoming more proactive and really taking charge of our journey? I love that.
I'm so happy you mentioned that too, because I think that's one of our big shared values. Everything that we've tried to do with Exploring Your Potential is create self-efficacy and activate the potential of these young people, put their life and their education and their opportunities in their hands. Students are filled with so many questions about life because they simply don't have the exposure and the experience. So what we've really tried to do is speak to that, those questions really, really clearly. And I want to show you a few of the things that we've done and some of the tactics we use that any of you can employ in your programs, but also a little teaser inside of what's inside of the programming that we built. We immediately look at the questions and the challenges that students are having and give them very tactical frameworks and tools to use to overcome these challenges so they take control, like building their network. We talked about social capital. We'll do another session on that. There's so much to talk about here about building a supportive network and structure. Christina, I hope you'll join us for that as well in a few weeks, but really building social capital is huge. Another thing is, expectations. A lot of students are in education because of other people's expectations, not of their own, or they haven't fully fleshed out their own expectations of themselves because they don't know what to be, aiming for. There's a photo. These are all images, by the way, from EYP. And, like I mentioned, we built a really comprehensive online course that carries them through a very pedagogically rich, comprehensive process to understanding who they are, where they want to go, but really building on the soft skills and the life skills so that they feel confident and motivated. But, here's one of the sections where we talk about their challenges. And so part of this is trying to show them a wide variety of people and also real stories from people who they admire or brands that they admire. Here we brought in Cuttino Mobley, who was a top NBA star, talking about how his life was completely derailed from a health issue when he was in the NBA. You'll see too at the bottom, this is actually live commentary from students in EYP talking about what the expectations are that they have for themselves. I brought this in because I wanted to show you one student gave 3 words or 4 words about their expectations, and another went into deep depth about what they're thinking. The person who goes into the deeper depth and gets to think about these things is the one who's going to make more tactical decisions and actions to pursue that direction. So one of the things we're really proud of about EYP is that we're opening up space to talk about these really uncomfortable conversations and these big challenges and opportunities for students in a safe environment. Christina, did you want to add something?
No, you're good.
Oh, awesome. Okay, the other thing was earning and managing money. One of the big strata details was about not knowing financial pressure. 26% say they can't afford to go to school. I would say you can't afford not to go to school these days. We know that a college degree will impact a student's life with bringing over $1 million more income into their life. So education makes all the difference in the world, especially as they navigate being labor versus being talent. And again, everyone has their own path in life, but we want them armed with the decisions and the opportunities and the options. So here, in EYP, we ask them again, like, what does your financial outlook look like right now? And where do you want it to go? I like the idea that when we open up these conversations, and we can do this live in person, we don't, need to do this online, but, again, we tried to create a framework to do this hard, heavy lifting for you all. But I mean, look at how people talk about how they don't think about their finances. Thank you for the encouragement to make me look at what I'm spending money on. Thank you for helping me think about how to do this better, how to start planning, how to be more strategic. Another thing I pulled is, what do they have to offer? I brought this out too, because this is a really valuable piece of EYP. We've actually had a lot of teachers literally stop their lesson plans for the day and focus only on this. If you ask your students one question, what value do you offer in the workplace or in society? Many of them will say, I have nothing to offer. We know as parents that breaks our heart. I mean, I'm not a parent, but as parents, as loved ones, it breaks your heart when you see someone you care about not see their value in the world. But again, that comes from exposure and networks and mentors. If they don't have that, how are they going to feel confident enough to present themselves as talent? How are they going to present themselves as peers in school or as candidates for big opportunities? So a lot of what we do is really helping them look at where they are clearly and how to cultivate the story they want to tell the world. One of the things, we do a ton of assessments in EYP, and one of the things that we do is a comfortability assessment about how comfortable do you feel about being around different people, being around different cultures, being in different environments, being around people who speak different languages. And we asked, do people actually listen to you? And, 20% said sometimes, 60% said most of the time. We find it really interesting to have conversations like this, because what does it take for people to listen to you, to see you? Sometimes we don't have those skills, or we don't really see how other people see us out in the world. And that's something we all grapple with. How about when people introduce you? If they're not making connections, if they're not meeting people, if they're not building social capital, finding mentors, advisors, opportunities, if 29%, 30% are saying people aren't introducing me, that means either they don't have the right resources around them, or people aren't thinking to help them, that they need the help, or maybe they're not presenting as worthy of those referrals. So a lot, as you go deeper with these conversations, one of the things we really strive to do with EYP is help bring out these topics so that you can have these conversations in school. Another thing is really helping students make sure that they feel free to be the individuals they are. I know that's hard for a lot of people, and it's hard in different environments and different, situations, but we're all very different. We're all playing with a totally different deck of cards. And we don't know what people are going through. But one of the beautiful things I really think we try to do with EYP, and we try to do with all of our partners, is make sure that students feel valued as individuals. And they realize that there are many opportunities in the world for them, and many ways they can carve out lifestyles that suit their needs, their learning styles, their any disabilities they might have, special abilities they have, but really giving them the freedom to pursue life in a way that's empowering for them. We find 82% going through this process feel better about their personal potential, and that is probably the thing we're most proud of. There are a lot of tactical strategies. We don't have time for a lot of them, but I just wanted to put this up on the screen to show you whatever your class structure is, whatever the program you're running is. These are all different things that you can be looking at to bring conversations like mental health and social capital and career planning and individual exploration and life skills. We can bring this into our students' lives in a variety of different ways. And I know I speak for Christina, I'm sure as well, and our whole team, that we are eager to have more of these conversations and would love the chance to talk to any of you about strategic ways to bring more of this type of conversation into your programs. Christina, do you want to mention a little bit about Ignite, and then let's open up for some questions or comments?
Yeah, so I just wanted to quickly just show a preview of what we've been able to create called the Mental Health Mastery Method. It is an online course meant for students, and it walks them through 9 modules, 46 lessons, where they're able to learn about the foundations and tenets of mental health. So they learn about anxiety and depression and the different types of mental challenges. But then we move into things like mindset and understanding how your thoughts, feelings, and actions are connected, and positive psychology. We learn a lot about resiliency, stress, understanding how you respond to stress, how do you reduce stress and positive stress outcomes, as well as mindfulness, self-care. And we talk a lot about actually getting support and really destigmatizing therapy and what it means to actually ask for support if you are in need. And then last is, of course, the sustainability piece, right? So how do they keep their mental health practices moving as they are finishing up with the course? They also get a workbook. So it's not just about them learning the information, it's also about how they can apply it to their own life. So every single lesson, all 46 lessons, have an accompanying workbook activity meant for the students to be able to learn how to directly apply it to their life, so they can have some action planning there. We work directly with schools and programs to integrate it into their curriculums, whether it's through, we've done phys ed programs, we've done through advisory programs, etc., so that students are able to have the information, right? And we're really taking that proactive and preventative approach when it comes to mental health, right? That every student is able to learn, build, and strengthen their mental health foundation along their educational journey.
And isn't it true that everyone in education has an opportunity to make an impact on this?
Every single one.
Every one of us.
Yeah.
All right, so here's the contact information for us. If anyone wants to get in touch, please reach out. Any questions, any ideas, you want to have any brainstorms, we would love to talk more about the work that we do, about the programs that you're running, about the challenges that you're having. We have a question for Christina here. Christina, for the course, is there one written at a high school level?
Yeah, so we actually say it's meant for high school and college students. So we have, for example, here in Jersey, an entire freshman class is going to be going through our online course, about like 450 students. So the language, the activities, all that is relevant for the high school and college population.
Beautiful, beautiful. Steve, your comments are great. Thank you. Studied motivation for 3 decades. And here's what I've learned in the nutshell. This is awesome. And Steve, can I brag about you for a second?
Sure. That was Ross's comment though.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll brag about you anyway. But I think I did comment on that already. Thank you for that. Yeah, thanks for the safe space to fumble myself in front of everyone, but I appreciate, I always laugh. I try to laugh at myself when I make mistakes. So I think that's a valuable lesson for all of us. I've burned and crashed badly in being a public speaker in the beginning and having to present myself in different ways. And I've spilled Diet Cokes in executive offices on their brand new floors and things. And I notice that the one thing I've learned that's been so valuable is when you do something wrong, laugh about it, smile, and move on. And people really appreciate it. What other questions do we have? We'd love anyone to pop on video or on voice. You're more than welcome to introduce yourself and
I can answer. There's one more question. His son is asking what reading level for my course. So we've actually even had some middle schoolers do it. You're making me like think of like F&P levels and what are the actual like numbers and letters and stuff with reading levels. And my brain is not there anymore. But I will say I have had middle school students do it. I once worked with a program and they had both middle schoolers and high schoolers. So we've had middle schoolers go through it and they were able to navigate the content. We recommend, if it is a challenge, to having adults be able to be there for guided discussions or more in-depth learning. We also have a whole teacher manual as well. So teachers are able to move students through the course too. So it's not just completely left on the students. Some places do that where it's completely self-paced, but a lot also integrate it where there's actual guided discussions and learning with an instructor at their school. So to make it also easier to help if there's any gaps in the reading or in terms of understanding that there is an adult that can also help facilitate.
Beautiful, beautiful. I also want to mention, we're testing EYP now at an 7th, 8th grade level, which we're so excited about because frankly, if someone had told me that I could be an entrepreneur when I was in 7th or 8th grade, my whole high school would have been so much nicer. I really struggled with that. But I also want to share a partnership we just launched with Junior Achievement Worldwide. We're now running across, there are 100 plus countries in terms of marketing and promotions and campaigns right now. So that's a really great way to look at some of the programs around life planning and career planning and social skills and all of that EYP is driving right now. Russ, is there anyone else that wants to make any comments? We have about 5 minutes left, so I'd love to get another person or two to pop in. Anyone can raise their hand too. I can't see, but Steve, who's driving, can. Oh, Russ raised his hand.
Okay, yes, I can weigh in briefly. I think, first of all, Jen, Christina, panelists, team, this has been excellent. A great sharing of information and not just what the problems are, but what we can do about the problem. I wanted to share one piece. Had a student in a psychology class over a decade ago, and I had a goal, certainly get to know all of the students on a personal basis. The cliff notes is this. I asked him, what are you going to do? He's, well, I'm supposed to go into accounting because dad is an accountant and mom is an accountant. Crazy Uncle Louie is an accountant. Aunt Bertha is an accountant. So genetically, I'm supposed to be an accountant. And I'm okay with numbers, but balance sheets are just not the thing. And I asked him one question. I wasn't motivating Ron. I was providing an environment where he became self-motivated. I asked Ron, well, tell me, what's a magazine that you read on a regular basis, monthly, or you have a subscription to? And he looked startled by my question. And he said, oh, yes, Sports Illustrated. And then he began listing all of the different teams that he followed, everything that he read, and the writers in Sports Illustrated. And it's Sports Illustrated. I didn't know the writers, but I knew the teams. And so he came alive. And I said, well, and he also had a sense of humor. He said, Dr. Watson, I read Sports Illustrated, and not just in January. Of course, that's the swimsuit edition for those of you who don't know that. So anyway, he came alive with that. And I said, well, what are your favorite teams? He listed 5, 6, 7 favorite teams. And I said, I'm going to give you an additional assignment here. I'd like for you to write to your top 5 favorite sports teams and ask them if they do an internship for accountants. And he looked startled again. I said, well, realize the sports teams do not have an accountant working on their floor or in their building. They have an accounting department, of which there is a busload of accountants. And he looked startled again. Well, really? He thought the only job he could get in accounting was in one of the big five, who then became the big three or whatever, as they gobble each other up on the street. So I said, I want you to write to 5 of your top teams. He did. 3 of them didn't respond. One of them wrote back and said, this was by email or paper, whatever, said, well, thanks for inquiry. We don't do this. But then one team said, you know, thanks for your question. We don't do it, but that's because no one has asked before. So since you asked, if you're available this summer, why don't you come down and do an internship in our accounting department as a student intern? Well, the team happened to have been Phoenix Suns. He had Aunt Louise, who lived in Scottsdale, so he had a crib where he could crash. He went down for the summer and became an intern in the accounting department at Phoenix Suns. Now, I don't have a punchline to that story. I mean, the ideal punchline is, and now he is the director of the accounting. No, I don't have that punchline, but it opened up his world. I didn't motivate him. I asked him one question where he found the key to unlock a door to motivate himself. So I would encourage anyone listening. Yeah, Jen, you get this already. Christina, you already get this. The panelists already get this. But the more people that can find some key to unlock each person's ability to motivate themselves, that can be magic.
Thank you. Russ, you always light up every room you step into, even virtually, and I am eternally grateful to you. Thank you for that. That was really, really beautiful. I think the reason we do, all of us, the work that we do is seeing those magical moments when young people see their own potential. And when we can help create environments that help that happen, we stay with them for the rest of their lives. They hang on to us forever. And those become those pivotal moments that changes everything. And so that's why, you know, we're so happy to be able to bring this program to you, to bring a whole series to you over the next few weeks. And thank you all so very much. Christina, this was wonderful. Your insights, your experience, absolutely fantastic. And the love you have for these students and the work you do is so clear.
Thank you so much for having me.
So appreciate it. Everyone, please, you know, go check out Ignite EDU. And learn more about Christina's work and how she works with schools on mental health programming to make sure students feel supported and loved all the way through. And anyone who's looking at how they can help their students, you know, carve out their own custom unique pathways in the world so that they feel like their individual traits and skills and interests are fully addressed and supported. Please check out EYP. And we hope to continue the conversation with all of you over the next few weeks and afterwards as well. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Cherie and Steve and Russ and everyone who jumped into chat. This was awesome. Really, really appreciate everyone's time.